Welcome to Coaches Exploring the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from a Principles Behind Clarity perspective. And I'm thrilled that Lynn, Elaine, and I have decided to dive deep into reviewing the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, something that's been a big part of my life for over 20 years. And now I get to look at it through a whole new lens. So this is amazing. And we're going to start right at the beginning in part 1 of the book, Paradigms and Principles, under the heading Inside Out. It's funny that the first thing I highlighted was that heading, Inside Out, because it's when we think about looking at this from a Principles Behind Clarity perspective, or the 3 principles perspective, that notion of inside out is the underlying truth of the principles. And here it is, like the very first 2 words in this whole book, inside out. It's like, oh, this is very aligned with the principles that we're talking about. So that just jumped out at me right out of the gate.
I think when this first came up, when we were discussing ideas of what our next project might be, I had only restarted the book a little while ago, and it was the thing that jumped out at me, which made me, took my mind in that direction, that there's synergy and there's something to look at. So, yeah.
Yeah. I know. And yeah, the very, inside out, reading it again, because it's exactly what he said in his first version, which I read something like 12 years ago, takes on, after my successive training, learnings, Jamie Smart's clarity, all the rest of it, but it takes the very focus on the reading to a different level. And like you said, Greg, in the introducing us kind of thing, it's being able to see something through a whole new lens. Which so those very words, like, whoa, let's start from here. Great.
Yeah. Well, so it's just occurred to me as I'm kind of skimming through what I highlighted here, and this literally just occurred to me. The first time I picked up this book was in probably 2000 or 2001. I wasn't married and I had no kids. Now I've been married for 22 years and I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. And I realized this time going through, like, reading these stories, because Covey uses his own personal life and his stories of his children and his wife to make a lot of his points in here. I'm realizing, oh yeah, like, this is why this is resonating with me so much more deeply now, reading through it now, having experienced raising 2 kids, and I can relate much more directly to what he's referring to, and kind of the trials and tribulations of being a parent. Anyway, it just occurred to me, it's like, oh yeah, it's like, talk about a new lens. Like, my old lens was as a young, single, career-oriented person. Now I'm looking at this as a middle-aged, seasoned parent.
Yeah, and with so much more experience. And I guess we strive to help people have insights and let's say be able to update their current levels of understanding. But there's one absolute, I would like to put it in as a fact, although time as such is not a fact, it is a concept. But the idea that just by living through life, we do automatically update and increase our the very insights that we have, which bring new awareness and an enhanced sort of goggle wearing process, kind of thing. It's like we just don't use those old goggles anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
it's funny because the other metaphor that has really been resonating with me the last few weeks is the idea of maps, which Covey relates to paradigms and things. But in this context, like, I didn't have a map of what it was like to have kids before. Now I have a very robust map. I mean, it's certainly not the map or the right map, but I have a reference point to it now. Um, anyway, it's just interesting. I'm seeing how this whole idea of maps, like, and just how many maps I have anyway, layers and layers of maps.
Yeah. And how, it could be that the map, whether you have awareness of being married or having kids
mm,
or anything about that. I mean, you could still, let's say at the age of 19, you can have an example of it because you have your parents and you
yeah,
were the kids of your parents, if you like. But how the map indeed may not change, it may never change, but the territory that the map could be pointing to is completely different.
mm,
The territory indeed will change,
yeah,
which, you know,
yeah. Well, it makes me think, like, if you, I mean, I still pretty much live in the same place I've lived my whole life, but like if you were to move away and then go back to where you grew up, like I remember my dad revisited Belfast, I don't know, 60 years after he left there was for the first time. And, of course it's changed. But he was kind of taken aback and surprised at how much it had changed. Yet certain elements that had stuck in his mind for all these years were still there, like certain landmarks or things, so he could orient to them. But yeah, the territory had changed dramatically over the course of 60 years.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Um,
What struck you in the early pages, Greg?
uh, well, in early on, after he tells the story about his son and stuff, he says, I became particularly interested in how perceptions are formed, how they govern the way we see, and how the way we see governs how we behave. And this was the beginning of him, I guess, realizing the role that paradigms play. But it really struck me, with that language, how related that is to the three principles: mind, consciousness, and thought, and how we're living in a thought generated perceptual reality. Because like he's talking about, he didn't quite get to where Sid Banks got to in terms of how our experience is created, but he's got the some of the elements there, and even the language of like how our perceptions are formed. Like he's right on the surface of it. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then it ends that section just before he gets into the personality and character ethics of, we began to realize that if we wanted to change the situation, we first had to change ourselves. And to change ourselves effectively, we first had to change our perceptions.
Yeah.
So again, it's back to understanding how our reality is created.
Yeah.
What I also from that, the first story, when the realization for both him and his wife around his son, in their attempt to do everything they thought was obviously in his best interest. What struck me from a principles behind clarity perspective was where they shifted was when they realized that it had to come from him. There was no other way. So it struck me in reading that they were doing everything they could, and I can't remember his language. Don't know where it is right now, but they were looking at him like there was something wrong, like he was flawed, like he wasn't capable, like he wasn't resilient, like he didn't have what he needed. And then when they saw that their approach was that, and that wasn't working, that was such an aha, and to see that, he'll be okay, essentially.
Yeah, he is okay.
Whatever. He's okay, exactly. Yeah. So that really came out loud and clear to me there.
Yeah. Well, the way you recount that, it's pointing to the power of insight, like, and they had an insight that it wasn't working, and why it's not working is because they were looking at him as if there was something wrong with him, like you said. So Yeah. Again, it's so aligned with the principles. It's like, I don't know. That's what, for me, this process has been exciting, because I thought when I first got into clarity and the principles, I thought all this 7 habits stuff I've done for 20 something years, I'm gonna have to throw that all away and start anew. And now it's like, oh my God, no, it's the same stuff. This is so aligned. It's like, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And again, forgive me, I can't give a page reference, as I say, because I'm reading it from the Kindle app. But he speaks when he as he goes to study he calls it the study of expectancy theory and self-fulfilling prophecies, or the Pygmalion effect, which basically says that, you know, if you as a leader place high expectancy on somebody, they will give you high results, a top quality results sort of thing, rather than the other way around. If you kind of, you know, push and strive and struggle to control somebody with a low expectancy of their output, the results will be less, quite simply. But that, to me, points to this a sense of when as a clarity coach, you're coaching somebody, and alongside and parallel to the principle behind clarity, is that when we create that connection with a client, a connection which we know is already existent in the world, if you like. The truth is that there is always a connection, but we can only fall in and out of connection, if you like. The idea that within that connection is a place of, which is very much inside, of high, you know, extraordinarily high reverence for who is sitting in front of you, where the high reverence or the high regard of whoever is sitting in front of you will, at the same time, create that space for insight. And therefore, your own empowering, new, fresh thoughts on what your idea, what your take, what your personal vision of, let's use the word success, may look like. So it points to me how our work, for example, is very much no more than a light. It's a guiding light, a beacon, so that people can shine their own lights and go in the direction that they need to.
Yeah, what you just said, there's a quote, I'm not sure where it is in here, but it's one of my favorites that I've built my business on, is people become great when you treat them in terms of their potential.
Yeah.
And like, there's a line here, he says, you know, when we began to see our son in terms of his own uniqueness, we saw within him layers and layers of potential that would be realized at his own pace and speed. And what you just said too, it's, you know, when you, like, you know, potential for me now is just another word for who we really are. Like, we are potential. We are the divine energy of life. It's, you know, and so are our clients. So is everybody. So like, it's funny because recently I've rejigged that quote for my own purposes to say, instead of people become great, I now say people realize they're great. Like, you're already great. It's not, you don't have to become great. Yeah. You already are. You just have to realize it. Yeah. I'll share a funny, I don't know if this is a funny story. It's a funny story for me. When I first picked this book up, the word potential kind of just jumped out at me over and over again, to the point when, within a few months of first picking this up, I was doing my mid-year performance reviews with my staff. And so I thought, how am I going to incorporate this into this process? Because this was my new way forward, this book. And much to the chagrin of my employees. But I went through the standard questions from the kind of HR performance review process. And then at the end, I asked them, I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your performance versus your potential? And you know, some people were delusional and said, "Oh, I'm operating at my full potential already," and I'd be like, "Really?" And other people one guy in particular, he said, that's a great question. I don't know. Let me go away and think about it. And then he came back the next day or two and said, I have an answer for you now. 6 out of 10. And this guy had been working for a long time. He got into this level and he did a great job, but he wasn't pushing himself. And that question, he realized that he had so much more to offer, to give, or to accomplish. And within, I don't know, a few months, he resigned and found a better job somewhere else. And he's moved on to, I think right now he's a vice president for some bakery distribution company. And, I take zero credit for all the things that he did and whatever, but that question for him, thinking about your life versus your potential, that set him off on a whole new trajectory of what he was capable of.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just like one real life example of how this has kind of played out for me and for some of the people around me.
Yeah, and understand.
An amazing story. I love that.
Go ahead, Liz.
No, I was thinking, as you were both talking there, I was thinking about because in this opening section here in the story about the kid and what they had invested, it came through very clearly what him and his wife had invested. There was a lot of their ego and their image, and we're raising our kids to be whatever, and a lot of that was, and yes, we want the best for a child and we're doing all these great things, but there was a lot of them invested in it, and they saw that too. They didn't see it as they were doing certain things, but they saw that too. And I kind of drew a parallel as you were talking there about Elaine, about when we're with our clients, and even Greg pointing there to potential. It strikes me that when they fly is when we're not in the way. when we're not all up in our head and the connection is there, and we're not, I don't know if it's correct to say not invested, but when we're really not up in our head and we're truly, truly trusting that they have it all for them. And all we have to do is be a guide or provide the space, or I'm not sure that we lead them to insights, but there seemed like a lot of parallels there for me in that.
It just sort of an idea again, as you were talking, and the idea of, like, we all have a laptop or some device of some form or the other, which contains an enormous amount of information that we ourselves have actually put into it, but also, let's say, it's come with the product, straight from the factory. But the thing is, if we don't put the damn thing into the plug and switch it on, like, nothing happens. So it's the idea that the potential is the actually switching it on bit. It's already there, but it just needs to be switched on. Then it will be revealed. Just that kind of idea. And that just came to mind because
a great analogy.
I asked you to cut a bit out because I haven't got my battery plugged in.
You weren't plugged in.
Oh God.
You were momentarily potentialless.
Yes.
There's a line on, for me, page 21 that I highlighted. It says, aha experiences in life when suddenly things click into place. And I highlighted that just, again, I'm looking for things in this book that are consistent with the principles, that pointing to insight as being a powerful force. And then we move into paradigms. I already talked about maps a little bit. But I highlighted this part. It says, the point is, you'd still be lost. The fundamental problem has nothing to do with your behavior or your attitude. It has everything to do with having the wrong map. And I think that was at the end of a story of talking about being in Chicago with a map of New York, or something like that. But again, like the last few weeks for me, this whole map thing has just really exploded, and realizing how, I don't know, out of date some of my maps are, how ingrained I've been in some of my maps. Like, I'm not letting this map go come hell or high water. Like, this is, and I don't know, it's been really illuminating for me. I just wrote a post that I'm going to send out, I think today, about, this is funny, like, but my wife and I argue sometimes about like how we get out of our subdivision. So if I'm driving, there's a certain route I take, and if she's driving, there's a route that she takes. And when she goes her way, I'm always like, why are you going this way? Especially if we get stuck behind a school bus or in traffic or whatever. And she's left-handed and I'm right-handed. So I think just right there, the way we orient to the world is different just by virtue of that. But it just made me laugh, like how, like, I've been operating under this thing, like, no, I know best. Like, my route is the route. And it's just, I don't know. I've just seen through it and see like how silly it is. And that, of course, she has a different map than I do. She's a different person with a different orientation to the world. So, and what's the big deal? So, I mean, there's another one that came to my mind was, I have a map for how to load the dishwasher. And when my wife or my son doesn't load it the way, like, I open the dishwasher to put stuff in it, it's like, who put these glasses over here? This is for mugs. Like, the glasses don't go here. And I used to get so mad about it. Now I just kill myself laughing. I'm like, what an idiot I was.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah,
the dishwasher one's great because if people come into your house and they ask permission, people have actually come into my house and asked permission after dinner if they can load the dishwasher just in case, like, you have a way and it's not right, and it's hysterical. I mean, it's just, it's funny. Yeah. Oh my God, crazy.
Yeah. And I think, and the idea was still in the, he was talking about maps and how no good a map of, to get to Chicago using a map of Detroit. I can't remember which way it was. And then and how ineffective using a different map would be to get, because you'd end up in the wrong destination, and what you could try and do about that, and how he suggests, well, you can work on your behavior and you can try harder and double your speed even, which is kind of like what the whole world seems to be doing. Because but the only things you just get faster to the wrong place, and I just love that. My goodness, I've been living my whole life like that. And again, the to connect it back up to the idea of clarity, and is quite simply that the only thing there's from the realization, the insight, there is nothing more to be done, if you like. There's no Covey says, behavior or attitude that will modify that. It's just seeing it, and then the what you need will come to you. Like, I need a new map. And that's it, full stop. That you don't have to do anything after that. After the awareness, after the realization, actually nothing has to happen. And there's no, again, Jamie's words, the idea that always struck me, the idea that you've kind of got no more dog in the fight, because it sometimes seems that if you're trying to get to the wrong destination even faster, it's like you are actually trying to prove something to somebody else's map of life. But then that whole concept just drops away. And again, there's been no agency to change your attitude or change your behavior, which, for a long time, I think every single, as Covey himself says, and his wife about his kids, they kept trying to change the kids' attitude and behavior. And it's just not going to work. But
they just got lost twice as fast.
They're just going to get lost twice as fast.
Still lost.
And the kid's probably going to do twice as badly in his baseball attempts, or he's just going to give up, quite simply, because it doesn't make sense anymore. But if you go back to trying to work out what a new map would look like, then you're going to be finding some probably results, some answers to what you're doing. And again, of course, the classic for me, which is always a wonderful reminder that there's just no way on earth, but I used to struggle with this, that anybody is going to tell me what to do. I mean, I've been like this since I was a kid, like you are just not going to tell me what to do. But of course, it created me problems, all round and in every area of my life. But the kind of double thing is, well, okay, well, if my answer would be, well, if you just ask me nicely, I'll do it, kind of thing. But it's the same thing. They're still telling you, whether they tell you nicely or not so nicely, it doesn't make any difference. But when you realize that in reality, actually, it's you going to create your own map, and there's a huge open space for that, which fits into the rest of the world, to society, to people, to your next door neighbor and your husband or your wife or your family and all the rest of it, just because you work out of your own map. That's just so awesome.
Did you guys do the exercise at the end of this chapter or this part with the numbers? You had the numbers from 1 to 53.
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me as an example of once you have a little bit of a map. So like the first time I found all the numbers, I can't remember how long it took me, but I basically was just, scanning with my eyes and looking for the numbers. And then often I'd find like 2, 3, or 4 numbers ahead of where I was looking. So then when I found the one I was looking for, I knew I already knew where the next 3 or 4 were, and I thought I was making progress. And then you go to the cheat sheet that he provides, which is like it's divided into 9 quadrants, and each number and you whip through it like nothing.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit, like it's so true. Like even with a simple little 9 quadrant mapping of this chaos of all these numbers, it's such a night and day difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the paradigm of the principles behind clarity comes in. Is, at least that's been my experience, is like once you realize how your experience is created and who you are going through life, the difference is the same as looking at all these numbers and trying to figure it out versus, oh, this is how it actually works. Oh, this is quite easy. Like that's been my experience with that, the paradigm of the principles.
Yeah. Yeah, and how when you don't have, let's say, the guide, of the paradigm of the principles behind clarity, as I was saying before, you can still get places, but you get there an awful lot slower, or you might not get there at all, which is another issue, of course. I'm just going to, with that like little exercise that Covey puts in, I actually did it first time round fairly quickly. And I thought, I must be a genius. Well, I'm not a genius, but I realized that inadvertently and parallelly, I play this Mahjong Connect game, which means I've got to very, very quickly scan for the like pairs. The thing is, I'm very good at scanning for things.
So you spent years training for this exercise.
Well, unconsciously, yes, because I thought, there's something wrong about this. But like you said, through when you have let's say, an understanding of the principles behind clarity, again, I'm just wondering, I don't know if this is true, but I'm beginning to wonder if actually well, yes, you would. If the principles behind clarity become your map, then you're flying.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm quite sure if I'd done this exercise, let's say, with my principles behind clarity created through me playing Mahjong sort of thing, because I realized, oh, well, this is what it is. So now I can do it, kind of thing. Because I realized that, I'm not a genius here. I'm not being clever, because just doesn't work like that. So what was it that, well, I got a map actually, but I'd unconsciously created it.
Yeah.
And I promise you guys, it's taken me hours and hours of time to hone down my Mahjong skills. Do you know what I mean? It's taken. I still sometimes get it wrong. Don't do it very quick. So
cool. We're at 30 minutes. So we just do a wrap up, like what if there's one more thing each that we want to talk about in this section?
Can you give me just a second?
Yeah.
I'll just because I get a sort of a paragraph at a time. I'll just.
I'll probably just, whilst you're looking, Elaine, there were a couple of things that I highlighted, and I'm still only on page 28. So, something that struck me: we see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we are conditioned to see it. And when we open our mouths to describe what we see, we in effect describe ourselves, our perceptions, and our paradigms. And for me, that also spoke to the principles behind clarity, and how everything that we experience is thought generated and coming from us. It's not out there. It's not our parents or circumstances or whatever we might want to put it on today. So that sounded quite loud to me.
Yeah, and there was just one thing I've underlined here. It's when he goes into sort of compare, let's say, the character ethic to what he calls the personality ethic. And on the no, he says, he's kind of dissing the personality ethic in long run, but he does, however, say that there's some kind of cool phrases have come out of it, such as whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But where, to me, as far as principles behind clarity are concerned, where that actually falls flat, although it is kind of a cool phrase if you think about it, it's kind of hopeful and uplifting and all the rest of it. It's the getting to the part where the mind is able to conceive, which we can only get to through insight. It's the what comes before part that was sort of lacking out of that little quote. Yeah.
I mean, for me, that this first 70 pages of the book is so rich. Like if you just rip these 70 pages out and studied that, it could make a huge difference in people's lives. Concepts like the old woman, the young woman thing to show how we perceive things, the PPC balance, the whole idea of paradigms and all the stories that go with that. Anyway, I just loved getting back through these 70 pages, and I don't know, it just re-energized me, reinvigorated me into I love the fact that we're doing this. So
and I mean, my thing is, that I've now read again the whole book, and I would, if nothing else, I would seriously advise anybody at least just to read this first part, because just absolutely, Greg, it's what you say, and read it and then read it and then read it again.
And we're not even into a habit yet. It's like this is habit 0 or whatever. All right,
I'm going to finish with one sentence.
Go
just
ahead.
One, because it was the one that I was like, I know I start something. I've got all these I start something. Page 43, still in the Inside Out, but I have never seen lasting solutions to problems, lasting happiness and success that came from the outside in. That pretty much said all.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's wrap that first section up there, and we'll next time we'll get into habit 1.